Okay, we're back again, and still painting away here. A lot of this is going to look the same. There I am flattening, making a new layer. So combining the top two layers, and then just starting some more. Just lightening. A lot of this is going to be really boring to watch, because it's very repetitive. It's a lot of the same, just going gradually lighter and lighter and lighter. Just be grateful that it's not real time, that it's twice as fast, because it would take twice as long. And again, if you're getting bored with any part of this, I'm trying to interject and give some insight into things that I'm doing along the way and things that I've learned along the way, to keep it interesting and try to bring a little more insight. Right now I'm starting to put some more light in there and trying to really imagine, this light coming down and where it actually hits and where it misses, and what's in shadow, what's in highlight, what's in halftone. One thing that's really great to study, if you haven't, is to study, how light hits objects and the different parts of light and shadow. I put that in my How to Illustrate Children's Books, but you can find it. You can find it if you Google it. You don't have to, buy that series just to find that out. So you might want to Google something like, light and shadow and sphere, the word sphere, and you'll probably get a diagram on Google that'll tell you, where the highlight hits, where the halftone hits, where the core shadow hits, and where the reflected light hits. And, if you follow that, things will start to have form. They'll start to round. They'll look solid. They'll look three-dimensional. Getting that light right. So I'm starting to work some texture, and I'm actually what's actually happening here is as I'm playing around, because I lost some of the original lumps that the frog was supposed to have. I start to find this kind of reptilian skin, and it's not really frog-like, but I kind of liked it, so I kind of went with it. Being that this is a fantasy piece, I figured, maybe it would look more unique if I wasn't trying to copy, exactly what an amphibian looked like, but more what a reptile looked like in a frog, and maybe I'd come up with something kind of unique looking, and so I just kind of went with it, maintaining the spots. And what you're going to see is the spots on the frog. I pretty much keep them till the end, and they just don't work. So this is one of those things that just absolutely didn't work in my painting, and I end up getting rid of them. So if they start bothering you while you're watching this, they bothered me too, and so I took them out. And I actually had to repaint because I didn't have them on a separate layer. But they didn't affect my sketch or my underpainting area, because I keep those layers locked. So it wasn't very hard to actually go in and fix those. Putting a little light on the leaves here. Excuse me. Now, this is probably a good time for me to talk about value patterning again and get a little bit more detailed. I have some really strong beliefs, and that is that images tend to be stronger design-wise when objects appear dark on a light background or light on a dark background. In this painting, the background is light, so all of the objects are dark against that background. They can have light within them, but if you squint your eye, the whole shape reads as dark on a light background. I teach this. I believe in this. The images that I like kind of adhere to this. There are a few artists that I really admire that break this successfully. Peter de Sive is one of them. He is a master, an absolute master at value, and he breaks it the rule really well and can go from light to dark on the same object and it doesn't miss a beat. But most of us are going to be more successful if we make dark grass on a light background or light grass on a dark background, dark leaves on a light background, light leaves on a dark background, dark figures on a light background, vice versa, dark frog on a light background. Now, I'm putting a lot of light into this grass here, but again, squint your eye, the edges all read as dark on light, okay? And lots of it falls into shadow. So it just what it does is it simplifies your value patterning throughout your painting. Anytime you simplify something, it actually makes it easier for the viewer to comprehend the whole image. So, when you look at an image, like we talked about with the thumbnails earlier, your eyes move all over the painting, and it's unconscious, but your eye has an eye movement, an eye trip, and it moves all over the painting. And the more value changes that you give the viewer, the more they have to comprehend, the more complex it is. I have a lot of examples that I show in class from other artists, both good and bad, and I always bring up whenever I show an image as a bad example. I always say, because I get some off the internet sometimes, and I always tell my students, we don't know who created this. We don't know what the time constraints were. We don't know what the age was. We don't know how much practice this person had, how much schooling. And so we're not making fun of someone's artwork when we're using it as an example of what not to do. We're just saying, this person hasn't progressed along the timeline of their career in art or their hobby in art or whatever to have, everybody's on a progression path, right? And so anyway, that's a disclaimer when I talk about, using someone's art as an example of what not to do. I have plenty of those. I have drawerfuls of examples of what not to do. Spent the whole first half of my career creating what not to do. So we all do that at some point. But anyway, one thing that you'll see in a what not to do kind of painting is lots and lots of value patterning. So you're going from light values to dark values constantly back and forth without any real rhyme or reason, without any real plan, So like, for example, the leaves that I'm doing here, there's a lot of value patterning in there. There's a lot of light and dark, right? And what I'm going to try to do is unify all these with a gradient at the end. So you'll see that. So you definitely have to show the leaves, and you can't show individual leaves on a plant like this unless you have light against dark. So you've got to have that value patterning. But what I'm going to do is try to simplify that pattern by joining it in a gradient. And so that's going to happen, but not yet. So we're going to get there. So anything you can do in your painting to simplify it, to clarify, is going to be better. If you're familiar with writing, and basically all the arts are the same. Writers, they write the first draft, then they write the second draft. So see, here's where I'm gonna lighten. So I'm just showing you right there that with the lasso tool, you can draw a path, and then you can lighten against that edge. And so that's what I'm doing right here. And all of a sudden, it protects the edge of the frog, but it lightens on the inside of that. I just used the lasso tool and just drew around the frog there. Now I'm just going to erase the little lumps back out of that, because I just painted that little blue on a different layer there, So I can just erase the paint off of that layer. That's something you can't do with acrylic or oil or any traditional medium. Erasing paint. Actually, you can with oil. You can do a rub out technique. So I'll probably get an email of somebody if I don't mention that. You can erase paint in oils. It's hard to do in acrylic, but you can in oils. So what I did there with that gradient is, I clarified the edge of the frog, making the frog, again, a dark figure on a light background, and unifying those leaves so that they become more of a unit that functions together rather than all these separate individual leaves. I mean, that they're there, but that now it functions. It ties them together value-wise a little bit. Change the song. So yeah, I was talking about how the arts have a lot of common traits. So if you're trained in music, it's exactly the same. A lot of the ideas of design, designing a musical piece. There are songs that are designed well, that are planned well, using good formulas and a good musical theory. And then there are screenplays and novels and that are also designed very well. There are there's a lot. I mean, you could take lots of schools or classes on how to write a successful novel, how to diagram the plot, how to design the characters, how to figure out if your characters are complex enough, if they have enough depth to them. A lot of times I like to talk about things that are random and chaotic versus things that are designed well. Things that are random are, you take a handful of marbles and you drop them on the floor, and wherever they end up, that's where they end up. That's random, that's chaos. But the difference when you design something is you arrange, you plan, you organize. And so I've organized those leaves in the background to function together. A lot of times when people watch movies, they go, "Oh, you got to see this movie. The cinematography is just amazing." What does that actually mean? What does it mean to have good cinematography? It just means that the director got lucky, and the picture turned out to just happen to look really good. Does it mean that he has some magical skill that he can just sort of make things look amazing, or do they follow design principles? And they do. They follow design principles. They're doing some of the same things that I'm doing here, or I'm doing the same things that they do. They design their scenes. They design the lighting. They design the angles. They design the whole shot, how they frame the shot. They often use dark figures on a light background, silhouette, or light figures on a dark background so that they read. When you see a movie that really doesn't strike you very well visually, usually it's because not a lot of planning went into the scenes. That's why TV shows often don't look as good as movies. Movies have a bigger budget. They can hire more art directors, more lighting people, and they can spend more time setting up a shot. They can light it. They can check it for color, all sorts of things to get it to look good. And often TV, they don't have the same kind of time frame. They don't have the same kind of budget, so they often have to shoot on a much quicker schedule, and as a result, the artistic level suffers. So, just lightning again. Just kind of here in the. What I'm trying to do is, you'll see a lot of pattern up there, a lot of kind of modeling going on. And I don't really want a whole lot of modeling. I don't want it to look completely smooth. Somebody might say, there's an easier way to do what you're trying to do with that transition. You just grab the gradient tool and you can make a perfect transition. But that's not what I'm going for. I want it to have a hand-tooled look. I want it to have the warmth of the human hand, and to feel like a painting. I don't want it to feel, like I just grabbed a gradient tool. And, that leads me into talking about another theory that I have, and that is that I think that the artists that most of us admire have a style, have a way of painting that you can't just figure out. That when you look at it firsthand, you don't go, "Oh, I know exactly how they did that." So there's kind of a, if you will, paint alchemy to their to their style, where you look at it and go, is that digital? Is it traditional? Is it mixed media? I bet they're using oil. No, it doesn't really look like oil. And what happens there? I think, for me, the reason that I think that that's a good thing is, with your art, it's like anything. It's like a magician. The magic is not knowing how the trick was done. And that's where the intrigue comes from. And when you know exactly how something's done, it becomes worth less. Not worthless, but worth less than something that you don't know how it is done. And so when you have this kind of a mysterious nature to your artwork, I think people value it more. And so I think that's one of the reasons why I gravitate towards art that is a little more complex in nature. I'm not grabbed by art where someone takes a few Photoshop tools and you can tell exactly what tools they used, and it looks like they painted it in 5 or 10 minutes. I gravitate towards the kind of art that looks like it really took a long time. Now, having said that, I really value Mo Willems' work. And if you don't know who he is, Google him up. He wrote, among other things, he wrote the Knuffle Bunny series, Caldecott Honor books. But he also wrote Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus, and which spawned a whole nother line of books, also a Caldecott Honor book. And I absolutely love the guy's stuff because he's not trying to create high art, but the book itself functions together as a whole project, and kids love it. It's extremely creative. It's funny, and it's one reason why people buy picture books. They want to laugh. They want something funny. They want something unexpected, and he delivers that. The other spectrum would be like Chris Van Allsburg with the Polar Express. Highly rendered, beautiful illustrations, not funny. Very hard to compare the two. Both very valid, both very valuable in my opinion. And so there you go. Okay, right now I'm adding some orange to this green. I'm trying to dirty it up a little bit. I don't want the frog to just look really kind of neon green, but I want him to have a little more complexity to his color, and the orange will actually add kind of a richness. So I've grabbed another layer and just kind of thrown a little bit of orange in there. And you'll notice I keep losing the texture, and part of my process is not efficient at all. In fact, it's very time consuming. There's a lot of wasted time sometimes. There are things that, especially still in Photoshop, there are things where I'm just flat out wasting time because I don't know any better, or I'm lazy, or I've forgotten to take a step that would make my life easier. Putting this texture on its own layer would have saved me a lot of time, not having to go back in and put it in there. But really, it really isn't that much extra time, so I just kind of sometimes just kind of work like this. And for whatever, I guess you could say that sometimes I'm just not that careful when I paint. If I had to analyze myself, I'm a little haphazard, and I do things sometimes that wouldn't make a lot of sense to other artists, and sometimes I end up kicking myself because they don't make a lot of sense to me either. And I think if I wasn't as lazy, I could save myself some time, but in the end, I usually, at least now, and in the last 5 or 10 years, am usually able to get what I want out of a painting. I can usually work it long enough to get what I want. So I'm going to take that shadow now, or take the texture lines, and I'm just going to try to add a little depth, a little shadow on the underside. Remember, the light's coming from the upper left, coming from the left down to the right. And so I'm just going to say, okay, so on the lower right side, there's going to be a shadow on all these little pieces of texture. So you got your texture going here, and I had to kind of start it over there, so I kind of lost my train of thought a little bit. Still working the shadows. I'm losing the bigger dark spots, and then I'm getting them back again, and I'm kind of telling myself that they're going to work, and then sometimes this whole time with these big dark spots, I'm thinking, are these working? Yeah, I like the spots. Are they working? I think they are. I kind of like them. And then towards the end, I just and again, one of the best things to do is to get up, let sleep on it, maybe even a few days. Come back and look at it, and then usually it's glaring you in the face the things that aren't working. So on this one, I woke up the next day and finished painting on this, and I just realized these spots aren't working. I got to get rid of them. So, but you'll see that towards the end of the painting because I kept them through the whole painting. Just working on the feet a little bit. Getting a nice cool color here to kind of gray the rock out. When I choose gray colors, I try to decide, is it a warm gray or is it a cool gray? And depending on the light and stuff, I'm going to put cool gray in here at first, and then I'm going to go ahead and hit it with some warm gray later on for where the highlights hit. And that's just kind of a thing I like to do where, the cool kind of rounds and goes into the shadows, but the warm kind of comes on top for the highlight. And I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing here. Okay, so what I'm doing now is I'm going to try to put a reflection in the water. So what I did was I duplicated all the layers, flattened them, and made a reverse image. And you can do that, and you go up under one of the menus that I can't see right now. I'm sorry. And you hit. Actually, you go under Edit, and then you go to Transform, and then under Transform you go Flip Horizontal. So there you go. So what I did was I combined all those layers. I actually selected all of them, and then duplicated them. Right click, duplicate, and then flattened all those extra layers, the duplicated layers, and then went into Transform or Edit, Transform, Flip, Vertical on that upper layer there, which has now been flattened in, and now I'm painting on top of it. But that's kind of an easy way to get some reflection. So you just make a mirror image, and if you look at water, and just kind of be aware of what actually happens. One of the first things when you start painting, you're like, I really want to make something look reflective, and you struggle to make something look reflective if you're like me, and because you don't really understand what's going on, and really the only thing that's going on, especially with still water, is that anything above the surface is being reflected below the surface. So every color, line, texture, shape, shadow, all that stuff is just a mirror image. Now, it will change based on your point of view and your perspective, and things can get a little difficult that way, but that's basically what's happening. So you can just, like I did here, just kind of grab your image and flip it, and you got presto, instant reflection. You can't do that with a traditional medium. So that's another advantage of digital painting digitally. It makes doing things like that a little bit easier. Maybe now is a good time to talk about the 80-20 rule. And the 80-20 rule basically states that it takes 80% of the time to do the last 20% of work on your painting. So a lot of times I'll have people say, my gosh, it seems like you were painting forever after you were finished. And those are typically people who aren't artists and you know, haven't really ever done anything like, like a painting or anything, but um, a lot of times also students don't realize how much time they need to spend on a painting to really pull it off and to finish it, to give it that finished quality. And it literally takes just about 80% of the time to finish the last 20% of the work, because there's just so many little things to fix and to make right. And, you know, in the end, you can always cut corners and you can always say, I'm done. And that's one of the hardest things to do in a painting, is to figure out, exactly when you're finished. And you can definitely overwork a painting. But I think most of the time people tend to underwork their paintings. At least the beginning artists don't really have the ability to see what needs to be done. Don't have the ability to, or the experience to know how to finish it. Sometimes it's laziness. That's how I was when I was in school. Very lazy in many respects with my painting. I was a hard worker. I did a lot of work, but I also cut a lot of corners and was really pretty lazy. And then this kind of speaks to the idea of what I call taking ownership of your work. And this was a concept that was completely foreign to me. And by the way, when I was in school, the longest I ever spent on a painting was about 2 hours. And now as a professional, I think I've spent probably 60 or 70, maybe even 80 hours on one single painting. This one won't take anywhere near that kind of time. But taking ownership of your work to me means that, if you're working for clients, if you're, like you're doing a picture book or a reader, or you're doing an advertisement or an editorial or whatever, and you've got a paying client on the other end, taking ownership of your work to me means that you care more about how the art turns out than the art director or the editor. That you are willing to fix things, that you are willing to spend more time on your work than they are even expecting out of you. That you're not going to quit until you feel it's right. And for the first, I would say, 10, maybe even 12 or 13 years, I had no concept of this at all. My concept was basically, I did take pride in my work. I took some ownership, but when I felt like it was pretty much done, I was ready to just kind of quit. I was fine with quitting. Let me break in here and just say that one of the ways to help make your water look reflective is to interject some horizontal line work through it. Some ripples that cut across the vertical shadows or the vertical reflections, and that kind of gives it more of helps it to have a plane on top, so it's a flat surface. So that's kind of what I'm doing there, trying to work these little ellipses in there, saying, well, there's some ripples coming around this rock here. Just kind of throwing those in there. Later on, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I was working on my book that Teresa Bateman wrote, The Big Mouth Frog with the Big Mouth. And, I finished one of the paintings, and, I looked at it the next day. It was completely finished. It was finished according to the sketch that I had turned in. And, I looked at it and I just thought, I can do better. I know I can do better. And it was a tough call because it was finished. I knew that that Albert Whitman, my publisher, would accept it. I knew they would be fine with it. It was what I'd sent them in the sketch again, and I just decided, I'm going to repaint this frog. And, it took me the better half of a day to paint out and repaint this frog in there, but I really wanted to get it right. And that is such an empowering feeling, to be able to take ownership of your own work and to say, no, this isn't finished until I say it's finished. And I think when you cross that line and you get into that realm where, you know, you care about it more than anybody else, that's when you can really take off as an artist, because, you know, you're willing to give it whatever it takes, and you're not looking at, you know, what someone else will pay you or think about your work. It's yours. This is nobody else's. It's yours. It's a personal thing. And I found that once I developed that attitude, it seemed like I was able to do much better work over time. And I don't think you can just manufacture that. I think that comes over time. I think and this one thing I tell my students a lot is, until you get sick of yourself, you can't create better art, you know. So you have to get thoroughly disgusted with yourself. That's a good thing. Just get mad at yourself and tired of the stuff that you've been doing. And the stuff that you get tired of might be great. It might be awesome. But you want to step it up to the next level. And when I was in school, we used to call those pinnacle pieces. You know, where you're kind of on a plateau, you're doing the same kind of thing, and then all of a sudden something weird happens and you create this piece of artwork that you can't even believe that you made, and you're pinching yourself, and you're so in love with it, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. And then you spend the next, you know, months or years trying to do something that equals it, and it gets really frustrating because it's hard to get back to that level, you know. And that's what I like to call a pinnacle piece, you know, where you've reached a pinnacle and now you spend time trying to get back there. And the thing is, you just got to know that you can get back there and you can go beyond there. And that's what's amazing, is when you think you've done it and you're like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing I've ever done, you know, and you think I'll never top that. And then, you know, a year or two or something later, you end up beating that. Well, that's the end of this video. Just for size wise, we're going to cut here, and we're going to start again on video number 4. So see you there.